B1 family, welcome to Blacklogic. Today I have with you is Marcel Dixon. I'm very excited to have Greg here today. Marcel, I know you go by Marcel. My apologies, sir.
Okay.
If you will, can you give us just a small synopsis of your background so people are more familiar with you than they already are?
So, Greg Marcel Dixon here. I am a native of South Carolina as far as my lineage goes, even though I was born across the bridge in Savannah, Georgia. I live in the small town of Ridgeland. I'm a public school teacher by profession, and I ran for South Carolina U.S. Congressional District 6 against James Clyburn, but I was running for and on a reparations platform. I had other things, but that was the centerpiece of my platform, and I'm yet running again. My goal is, my motto is that until this nation does right by Black Americans who are descendants of American slaves and emancipated people, this nation is never going to be right. And I'm trying to encourage us to run for office as well, those of us who are just disillusioned with these current so-called leaders we have.
You know what? Before we start heading right into the justice system, there are some questions I think that may be pivotal to the conversation. Do you know the reasons why, you wasn't essentially elected for that seat in the 6th House?
It's a multitude, but the main one is people don't know me. I was a successful teacher, an award-winning teacher, but teachers aren't exactly rock stars. I mean,
right.
Unless you win, even if you win the National Teacher of the Year, you're still not going to be a rock star. So being a successful teacher who's won plenty of awards, plenty of accolades, as I did, that still doesn't translate into being known in the community. I cannot tell you how many students I have taught, and I've met their parents, and yet their parents walk right past me in the grocery store and don't even recognize me. So that's one. People just do not know me. I thought I was giving back by just being a successful teacher and having students who came to me, sometimes barely literate, leaving, not just making big improvements, not just on grade level, but being above grade levels, not once, not twice, but year after year. I thought that was enough for giving back. But when I saw those same students ending up in the same circumstances as students who made horrific decisions, some ended up in jail, some dead in extreme cases, I was seeing my students who did the best ending up in similar circumstances, or at least fighting the same poverty by Black students, in this case, that their parents were fighting, their grandparents have been fighting, their great-grandparents. I was seeing the condition of Black students in particular declining, while seeing the condition of other groups, their quality of life increasing, even if it wasn't increasing as much as they felt it should. And I realized that the issues were systemic. So people really did not know me. That's number one. And two, is money. You can win an election without money. There's a myth that you need money to win. No, you need money to campaign, or money makes it easier to campaign. And I just did not have a lot of it, like a lot of grassroots candidates experience. I'm truly grassroots. So those are the main two reasons right there. Oh, well, number three, and I'm running on a reparations platform. When has putting the needs of freedmen, the legal status of those of us who are Black, descendants of American slaves, emancipated people, since when has putting our issues front and center ever been popular in America? Abolition, as brutal as chattel slavery was, abolition was not popular. Most people at that time supported slavery, or if they did not, the abolitionists, they still supported Black Americans being second-class, third-class citizens. Number two, during the Civil Rights Movement, Jim Crow and redlining, this country was obviously not honoring the Constitution, and yet the majority of people still felt that Black Americans had the same opportunities as white Americans. And now the third phase, reparations. So there's that too. And by the way, it wasn't just the Republicans or people who are conservative who gave me backlash because of my platform. A lot of white liberals as well, and people who think they are Democrats before they're Black-type Blacks.
I guess the only question I have in regards to that is, why is it that someone like Jim, Cornbread Clyburn has the money year in, year out, 4 years, 2 years, 2 years to consistently win and somehow galvanize the Black votes in that district in order to keep him in office?
Well, it's a myth that he galvanizes the black vote. That's a big myth. 12 to 15% of my district came out to vote. That's it. 12 to 15.
That's it.
So I think people need to drop this myth that black people are tripping over themselves to vote for James Clyburn. The voter engagement in my district outside of a presidential election is usually 12 to 15%. It doesn't even reach 20. It barely gets over 20. James Clyburn's district has somewhere like 600 something, 500, 600,000 voters, and the man barely gets 120, 150,000. So we need to drop this myth that black people just love Clyburn so much. He gets the loyal, I'm a vote blue no matter who types. He gets them. And James Clyburn doesn't care if the majority of people in his district, eligible voters and registered voters, are not voting for him. He doesn't care. As long as he gets enough to get reelected, that's it. But we really need to drop this myth that James Clyburn is so popular with people in his district. I speak to a lot of people and they hate him. And you know who hates him the most? Outside of people of my thought process who feels like the whole system is just awful, old black women. They can't stand him. They were the most disgusted with him.
I thought they enjoyed his fish fries.
Yeah, some of them do. But when you take into consideration that my district is still 49 to 55% black, and he probably gets 100 or so old black women show up, or they can't stand James Clyburn. The old black men are usually his ride or dies. There ain't that many of them. But the truth of the matter is we've had millions of older people die off since the last presidential election. So if a lot of these Democrats, that's why I call the leadership, because of you, black Americans, the party will not exist without the vote of black Americans. The Democratic Party is the most powerful political entity in the world. And yet you don't do anything for your most loyal voter base, and we're declining, went to the bottom. You are a Democrat. They think they can just rely on older voters, and they think that every younger voter who's coming out of high school is automatically going to be some liberal voting for them. No, that's not the case at all. And they're in for a rude awakening as they're seen.
Okay. Well, let's move right into some questions regarding the justice system. Now, how has historical white supremacy influenced the development and structure of the American justice system? What is your take on that?
So white supremacy to me is too vague. When Jewish people, white Jews, experience hate, they call it anti-Semitism. When Asians were experiencing hate, they called it anti-Asian hate. Okay? Only black people do this vague white supremacy that doesn't center us. No. Even though this country has shown hatred towards other groups, this country has always had a special hatred and fear of black Americans, freedmen, foundation black Americans getting what we're due. So I'm going to call it what it is: anti-freedmen, anti-foundational black American hatred. So because white supremacy birthed it, anti-blackness and anti-freedmen foundation black American hate, but it's like the child that outdid its parents' awful legacy. And how it's developed the justice system? Well, first of all, 60% of people wrongly arrested, wrongly convicted of a crime are black. The majority of black men, not the black men, black women. 60%, where 15 to 20%, somewhere, give or take, of this country's population. How the hell are we 60% of those wrongly arrested, wrongly convicted? When we talk about the lack of justice in this injustice system, we often think of police shootings and how police officers have acquitted. We don't think about violent police encounters where our people are physically assaulted. There is overwhelming data to show that no group is more likely to be physically assaulted by a police officer when they're not resisting than a black American. No group, and a man, black men, number one, far number one. Black women are number two, way down the line. But black men, far number one. No group is more likely to be shot unarmed and not accused of committing a violent crime than a black man. No group is more likely to have their assets seized than a black man by a police officer, a crooked police officer. And when you read reports, the FBI even confirmed it, that police precincts throughout the nation have been infiltrated by white supremacists. That's code word for anti-freedmen, anti-foundational black American. Because we are always going to be the number one target. You know against whom they're going to come. So this is historic. Remember, one, it's not true that the entire origin of the police in this country was the slave patrols, but it is true that the origin of police in this country was never to protect us. It was always to protect the enslaving planter class. And against whom did they need protection? Us. Why do you think in some places like South Carolina, which was the blackest state for centuries in America, we have some of the largest military bases? They were put there because they had a fear of the large black population, doing things that they found so horrific, like fighting for freedom, getting equal rights. So it has always been this fear of Black Americans revolting, rightfully so, for what we are due. That has always been the driving force of this nation. And we still see that with the law enforcement. And here's the answer, because I don't like to just talk about the problem. The answer is we need our own judicial system like we had after the Civil War. We had our own freedmen judicial system. Native Americans have their own tribal governments. They
Absolutely.
have their own tribal law enforcement. Why the hell do they get that special recognition? But those of us who built the nation, and keep in mind, we were enslaved by Native Americans as well. Why is it that they get special recognition and special protection, but we as freedmen or foundational Black Americans, which is a social term, why do we, descendants of American slaves, emancipated people who are Black, why do we not get that same special status? I am pushing for us to have our own agency of the government, but separate from the government, just given a budget where we can have our own judicial system, our own law enforcement system. And of course, we will still have limitations that are set under the Constitution, but it has been shown with Black people, and more than likely they talk about Black Americans, free,
right?
Foundation Black Americans, where we have Black doctors, our level of complaints, malpractice, child mortality rates, they drop drastically, significantly. When a Black police officer responds to a call and they have to deal with other Black people, the rate of unjustifiable, disproportionate use of violence almost completely drops. Not all the time. We have some Black officers who are just as bad. When Black students have Black teachers, their rate of suspension and rate of success tends to increase. Now, that's not saying they have a magic wand they can wave and kids who are trouble don't become trouble, but they tend to perform better. The only area where Black people don't tend to perform better under Black people is politics, because we get a bunch of Black faces who sell us the hell out and are raccoons.
It makes me double back to a question when we're talking about the freedmen justice system, because it kind of makes me think of today how we are somewhat racial profiled 100% of the time. So can you explain the concept of racial profiling and how it contributes to the unequal treatment of Black Americans within the justice system?
Well, racial profiling is as old as the United States of America. While we were defending this country before it was the U.S., when it was just a British colony, and building this country, which led to it becoming the U.S., there were always stereotypes about us being uncivilized. They were doing that to justify chattel slavery. And then even after slavery, after we had built this nation, fought and defended this nation that has never fought for us, not once, that's always fought against us, they were already perpetuating the stereotypes of the lazy Black person sitting around and drinking, which actually reports from the Union Army at that time that had the military in the South reported it was mainly white men who were being lazy, not wanting to work,
Absolutely.
drinking,
that's correct,
being violent, and just expecting handouts. But there's always been these stereotypes that have been a justification for negative treatment of Black Americans. Why do you think this Black on Black crime bullshit, excuse my expression, is always perpetuated? The only group that is stereotyped and characterized by the worst denominator among their ranks is us. White men are the number one pedophiles in America. That's facts. Okay? I can go on with some other statistics. Now, is that saying all white men or the majority of white men are pedophiles? Absolutely not. And it will be disgusting to see that. But those same white men will turn around and see some Dusty who probably did something horrific and try to characterize all black people as that. If you are a white person or any group, if you are a white person, you have no room to talk about any group being violent. Not when the longest, most brutal, disgusting, homicidal history of violence in this country is and continues to be as a group, not as an individual, as a group, white Americans. And yet, most people will not say that. But let a black person do something that's horrific, and all of a sudden we feel as black Americans that we have to somehow prove that we're not like that. Prove to who? So that's where the stereotypes come in. And then racial profiling is just the other side of the same coin. And it's used to justify things like racial profiling. I remember something about, oh, well, the reason why people follow y'all around the store because so many of y'all steal, which actually the group that has been robbed the most are black Americans. What's owed tens of trillions of dollars, and that's a conservative number. Okay, if we were any other group, if we were the Holocaust survivors or their descendants, if we were Native Americans, if we were Japanese Americans who internal their descendants, no one will argue against this being old. But just because it's us, people want to argue against it. So no, the biggest thieves in this nation are the people in the American government who still owe us tens of trillions, a minimum, hundreds of trillions, and have yet to pay it.
If we became a protected class, would it be similar to the COVID-19 anti-Asian hate crime bill? What are your thoughts on that?
You know what's funny? Every member of the Black Caucus, because this was passed unanimously, it's funny. They come together bipartisan to do things to help every other group, and they'll come together bipartisan to do something against black Americans. Or what will happen, the Republicans will usually do something that's blatantly anti-black, and the Democrats will sit there and, oh, I'm so outraged by this, but they won't do anything legislatively to protect us. No, if we got protected class status, it will look similar to how it looked in the 1800s. We may not need the military to, be so visible, but it will look the way it looked in the 1800s. We will have our own agency of the government, as my platform calls for a return of the Freedmen's Bureau. The difference is this time, it will not be under the government. It will be a separate branch with its own autonomy. It will just be given a budget from the government, almost similar to how the Native American tribal governments were. We'll be given our own budget. It will only be staffed by us, those of us who are black descendants of American slaves and emancipated people, aka freedmen. And we will be able to use those funds to address our own needs. Yes, there will be accountability. The government has a right to hold any institution accountable, really. So there will be accountability. There will be constitutional limits, but we will be able to address the needs of our own people. And you know what's funny? Republicans should be first in line to support this because the party of reparations has historically been the Republican Party, but they're so anti-black bigoted, they won't do it. They call themselves the party of Lincoln. This was the last thing Lincoln did. Matter of fact, it was probably what he was still trying to do. So it will go beyond what they did for the Asians in Pacific Islands during COVID-19. But it's funny. You see how quickly they came up with that? A few agents were assaulted, and they came up with that. It's almost like they had it written years ago and just had to pull it out the vault. There was no study necessary, and it got bipartisan, unanimous support. Now, here's the thing, though. Where were these Asian Americans and Pacific Islander allies? Because remember, the majority of Asian Americans came to this country after 1965, the Immigration Act. That was only possible because of Black Americans fighting and sacrificing and dying, they were not freemen, during the Civil Rights Movement. Where was the allyship en masse from Asian Americans and the Pacific Islanders? Did you see it?
Well, I was going to say the allyship came when they were allowed to come in and buy up the property that was taken from our people to order, open up their shops and stores and things of that nature.
And then come there and be anti-black bigots. Where was the Black Caucus saying, we will not vote for this until you add something specifically for black descendants of American slaves, emancipated people, freedmen? Where was that? You know why this bill happened in part? You had two Asian senators, Senator Tammy Duckworth and Senator Elaine Hirono, who said, we will not vote or support a single piece of legislation until something is done to protect Asian Americans. They didn't have any shame about saying they're going to protect their people. The only group that has no balls or backbone are these so-called black faces in Congress. They all need to go.
Wow. Well, I definitely want to move to something I think that, really heads us in the right direction when it comes to those who look like us that don't support us within, Congress. How would you describe the current state of illegal immigration in the United States on a broad spectrum? What are your thoughts on that?
We are being invaded. This is literally an invasion. If Russia was if a bunch of Russians were lining up at the border of Ukraine, just walking in and taking and using resources in Ukraine and say, give us citizenship, America will be the first one to say we must protect Ukrainian sovereignty. If a bunch of North Koreans were just waltzing into South Korea and saying, we deserve citizenship, give it to us, and taking and buying and, renting and, well, not just renting, being given resources by the South Korean government, people in South Korea would rightfully riot. Or America, at the very least, the moment of seeing North Koreans flood South Korean border and coming in and taking advantage of resources, hospital space, roads, schools, in South Korea, America will say we need to protect South Korean sovereignty. If a bunch of Chinese were at the border of South Korea or the Philippines or Vietnam and just waltzing in by the millions, America would say we must protect South Korean or Philippine sovereignty. Yet, America is literally being invaded. I think they said somewhere like 5 million.
I was just going to quickly ask you, though, are there any specific trends or patterns that stand out to you?
Well, yes. And about 5 million, they say a minimum has entered. I don't know. That may be a low ball number. I think they said 5 million in the past 6 months. The only reason this country has not done anything about it because of two things. One, the Democrats love it and they don't even hide it because they want to replace the black voter base. You see, they realize we're waking up finally and realize that, hey, they ain't doing a damn thing for us. 60, 70 years, and we are worse off now in many respects than we were doing Jim Crow. So they're thinking, let's get these illegals here. Let's let them have anchor babies because that's what a lot of them are having. And then the anchor babies have the right to vote, which is why I believe in the repealing of birthright citizenship. If your parents are illegal, then damn it, you should be illegal, considered illegal too. Secondly, the Republicans pretend to hate it, but they really like it. Because if you go and look at some of their construction firms, who are they hiring besides these legal immigrants? So they pretend that they are opposed to each other to keep us fighting each other, but they really love it. And the trend I'm noticing, well, what I would say, as with everything, this is primarily hurting Black Americans. It's been shown by many, many studies. If it was not primarily hurting Black Americans, they would stop illegal immigration overnight. But because it's primarily hurting us, they're not doing anything about it. But just like with the heroin epidemic and the crack epidemic, they thought it was only going to hurt us. And now you got the quote-unquote opioid crises and all these other white kids and white people strung out on drugs. And it's absolutely insane. What they think is only going to hurt Black America, we end up surviving, albeit we're still hurting, we're still not right. And it ends up decimating them.
Now, when I think about illegal immigration, and I'm going to throw a little bit of trickery in here to see how you respond to this. From an economic standpoint, what are the potential benefits and drawbacks of addressing illegal immigration?
The benefit of illegal immigration is a very small one. It benefits the large corporations. It benefits them a lot. And a lot of these so-called politicians are in the pockets of these large corporations. These large corporations donate millions of dollars to these PACs that support the re-election of a lot of these politicians. A lot of these corporations give other little kickbacks and, do little small backroom deals with some of these elected politicians. So it's benefiting the large corporations, okay?
Okay.
The drawbacks is too many to name. One, you have places that are resource strapped. You have classrooms that are filled to the brim. And this is coming at a time where people don't want to be bothered with teaching anymore for a myriad of reasons. You know, students, the behavior of students is absolutely abominably bad. Parent involvement and accountability is non-existent. We just hope that parents support us. They're not mandated to do it though. So a parent could drop their kid off, and if they care, they'll support you. And if they don't, they can just not answer their phone and remember nothing's going to happen unless there's some extreme. Loads of paperwork. And at the same time, you have classrooms that are flooded with the children of illegal immigrant. You have hospitals that are almost at their breaking point. You have roads that are clogged. You have places that are short on affordable housing that are being taken by illegal immigrants. You have opportunities such as storefronts that Americans have worked hard to save to open businesses. And strangely enough, people who are in the country illegally. I had a student, she's a woman now. She started a little food business, and they shut it down because she didn't have some certification. Yet an illegal immigrant who doesn't even have citizenship is now filling that slot where she once was. I asked the town council that. They couldn't give me an answer. How the hell is it that person, an American who has been in this country, been in this country for centuries, she cannot open a business, she didn't have a certain DHEC or whatever certification, but a person who doesn't have citizenship can? No answer. Then a lot of them are anti-Black, extremely anti-Black. And when the case of Latin America, all you have to do is look at how they treat the Afro-Latinos. And a lot of the Afro-Latinos are self-hating. They can look as Black as you and I and will still go around calling themselves white. I've had students who will be called, quote unquote, Afro-Latinos and were classifying themselves as white. That we already got enough tap dancing, samboism among our range. We don't need to be importing more of it.
That makes me think about something, because I wonder, are there any successful policies or approaches from other countries, that the United States could consider when dealing with illegal immigration? Is it other plans or models out there that we could actually use as an example?
Well, I know Japan doesn't tolerate illegal immigration. Now, Japan is an isolated, real large island. I know
Correct.
There are some European nations. Even though Europe is being flooded with immigration, there are some European nations that just really do not tolerate illegal immigration or even legal immigrants coming to their nation in large numbers. Right. I know that Mexico, believe it or not, Mexico has very stringent laws on immigration. And even though it seems that they don't force it, Mexico doesn't mind facilitating immigration, illegal immigration, as long as they're coming to America and Canada.
Right, because I was going to say we had those large caravans that went through Mexico.
And they came here. But in Mexico, Mexico is notorious. Mexico will not only arrest an illegal immigrant, they will arrest anyone that aids them when they're trying to stay in the country. So Mexico doesn't mind helping them get to America and Canada. But Mexico is known for not tolerating illegal immigrants in their nation's border. Now, historically, Mexico has been a welcoming nation, but Mexico does have extremely strict immigration laws, and according to articles I read, they enforce them. I know that I don't want to name the wrong European nation. I don't know if it's Switzerland, Sweden, one of those Scandinavian nations that is known for having a high standard of living. Several of those Scandinavian nations that are purported to have some of the highest standards of living, and yet they have some of the lowest levels of immigration, illegal and legal. Now, right. I'm not necessarily against legal immigration, but it has to be controlled. You have these H-1B1 visas to do these tech jobs, and you have Americans like myself who has some, I'm new to the tech industry.
Congrats about the CompT certification, by the way.
Thank you so much. And yet having a hard time finding employment. And I'm new to the tech field, but there are some who are experienced having a hard time finding employment. Yet these same tech people go to car and say, we can't find anyone. Something's not adding up.
What's not adding up is they're not from India.
Exactly.
Right. So I wonder if you was elected to Congress, what would be some legislation that you may impose or write a bill on that could affect illegal immigration and legal immigration?
Well, one, the funny thing is we already have immigration laws on the books that, if implemented, would be pretty
And you're saying they're good enough? They're good enough?
I'm not saying I'm gonna go further than them, but if they were implemented, this invasion that we have right now underneath the slow Joe Biden would definitely not be occurring. But one thing I would do, we need to not just go. Even though I have no mercy on a lot of these illegal immigrants that come, because a lot of them are extremely anti-Black. They're benefiting from laws that we fought for. Okay, the reason illegal immigrants that come to America and buy a house is because the Civil Rights Act made it illegal to question a person's nationality, linguistic background. And yet they got the audacity to come here and be anti-Black American. So I will go further. One, however, I will go after the corporations. I will make it immense fines and also possible prison time for any corporation or anyone who knowingly hires an illegal immigrant. E-Verify will be mandatory for all firms. I don't care if you just have one other person working with you or you have 8,000. E-Verify will be mandatory. Audits would be done frequently. Okay? Because a lot of times these companies aid these illegal immigrants in coming up with fake identities.
So does that mean legislation that Linda Sanchez proposed, Republican, to have illegals to have a pathway to citizenship, this would mostly be strike down if you had to vote on it?
Absolutely. And she would be thrown in prison too, for if you ask me.
Yeah, it says here, the bill established a path to citizenship for certain undocumented individuals. The bill also replaces the term alien with non-citizen in the immigration statutes and addresses other related issues. Specifically, the bill established a new status of law prospective immigrant. The status should be available, to apply non-citizens who meet certain requirements, including being continually present in the United States from January 1st, 2021, and passing background checks after at least 5 years with this status. An eligible non-citizen may apply for and receive permanent resident status.
This is offensive. Now, but I really do not condone violence. I really don't, and I don't like it. I feel it should be a last resort. But something like this happening would be one of the last time we have to resort to that last resort. What they have, certain states and municipalities are giving illegals the right to vote. Now you have these so-called Office of New Americans, and you have a bill, a federal bill, that is trying to set up a federal Office of New Americans that will give illegals special resources, education, housing, you name it, healthcare. What good is being an American if you could just give the middle finger to our laws, hop over, and you're not only allowed to be in America as if you are an American, you are given resources they're not doing for the tens of millions, hundreds of millions actually, of struggling Americans. This is offensive, and damn, I say it's criminal.
You know, the third thing that I'm reading here tells me that big business is behind this. It says worked as a certain amount of agricultural labor in the 5 years prior to applying, meaning they was out there in the farms, you know, on the border of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, working for white people, probably working for 10 cents on a dollar. So this tells me that big business is behind this.
You know what? People like to say this whole they're doing jobs that Americans won't do. That's absolute BS.
There
have been many raids underneath Obama, believe it or not, underneath Trump, which, by the way, I am seriously, deeply considering voting for Trump. And I think they know that if Trump gets in office, he's going to actually keep his word about doing massive deportations like this country has never seen before. And that's why they're coming at him all these ridiculous things. Now, at first, I said maybe some of the things they're saying Trump did is true because Trump was out there. But now it's just getting more and more ridiculous by the second. And when you got crack being found in the White House after slow Joe Crow Biden's son, who's a crackhead, was there, and they're pretty much just shrugging their shoulders about it, not investigating, it's showing me that there's a concerted hit job. They do those things, even the little old me down here in South Carolina. But this lawsuit I have included Clyburn. But let me tell you something. After raids that have happened in Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. These were jobs that were agricultural and in food processing plants. They claim that Americans won't do these jobs anymore. So why is it that after tens and hundreds of illegals were rounded up and deported like they should have been, the next hour, it was lines of Black Americans signing up to do the job. In Chicago, Illinois, they raided a bakery, a large bakery. It was thousands of illegals that were rightfully arrested and processed for deportation. There are Black Americans right now still at that bakery doing those jobs. So this whole Americans, they're doing jobs Americans won't do, BS. No, they're doing jobs that Americans won't do for damn near free in horrific conditions. Especially Black Americans, we fought to be treated with equity. And even though we're still not getting it, we sure as hell ain't gonna go backwards anywhere that's even closely reminiscent of how we were mistreated. Unless you're a Democrat, then we just vote for you when you mistreat us anyway. That's all the comment. That's all the story.
Now, you said something that I guess is somewhat prominent. You said that you would consider voting for Trump. You don't think that would hurt your voting base since you're running on the Democratic ticket?
I'm not loyal to the Democrats. I'm loyal to the people. I'm going to do what's best for the people, not what's best for the party. And honestly, if anyone has common sense, people talk about some January 6th. We're experiencing a January 6th, January 1st to December 31st every damn day at the border. These illegal immigrants are coming over here, and they like to say, well, study shows they're far less likely to commit crime. Well, truth be told, the average American, believe it or not, is highly unlikely to ever commit a violent crime. Believe it or not. I think if you look at the violent crime of all demographics, Black Americans, I think less than 1% of the population of every demographic, racial, ethnically speaking, is very unlikely to commit a violent crime. So they need to miss me with that. That's not just something special to illegal immigrants. That's just something common to Americans, even though we do live in a country that doesn't have an issue with violence. However, we are seeing a January 6th every damn day at our borders. People are just giving the middle finger to our laws, the middle finger to our Constitution, waltzing in here and demanding things from our nation in a country in which they have not invested. And even legal immigrants. You got this Indian guy running for office talking about so he wants to raise the voting age to 25 and we have to be able to pass tests. Who the hell are you? First of all, he likes to talk about his parents had to pass the civics test, so therefore other Americans should be able to do as well. If he wants to start holding people to the standard of his parents, then let me hold him to the standards of my parents. My parents are from descendant people who fought in every war in this nation. So he needs to sign up and fight in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 to 6 wars before he can enjoy the rights that are due to American citizens. He needs to go through decades of inequity like my parents and grandparents experienced. If he wants to start holding people to the standard of his parents who no one asked them to come here from India, then let's hold them to the standard of our parents, and let's see if he even lasts 2 hours.
You know, that leads me to
arrogance of some of these people.
It leads me to Governor Abbott. What are your thoughts on them having the Biden administration, the Justice Department trying to sue the state of Texas because of the floating barriers? What are your thoughts on the floating barriers altogether with trying to decrease? You're not going to stop it, but trying to decrease the amount of illegal immigrants coming into the country.
Well, I do think it's possible to stop it. And I don't know a lot about these floating barriers. I heard they had razors on them. I don't know if that's true. The media.
No, let's say they did. They had concertina wire. They had barbed wires on them.
Okay, well, hell, don't jump in the water.
Right.
Nobody's asking you to jump into the fence. Don't jump in the water. If I see fences 5 miles away and I run into it like a jackass, that's my fault. Okay? I know the government's not complaining about that. They have barbed wire, electrical fences, armed security around their institutions. So why can't a person have barbed wire, armed guards, and more around our state borders? I have no issue with it. Don't come to the country illegally. If something befalls them tragically, that's a lot of their fault. Okay?
Absolutely, I agree.
The same way, if I try to climb the fence of the White House with a knife or a gun and I get shot down, that's not the White House's fault. That's my fault. Now, Am I an Abbott fan? No, I'm sure he's probably a Confederate like that fat, plump Ron DeSantis thing in Florida. I'm pretty sure a lot of them are of that view, but I don't have to like you to agree with some of the things you do. I do support the true
Absolutely.
people who are against illegal immigration, and he has been really standing his ground on it. He has sent the National Guard, I believe, to the border, or he has. I don't know if it's still there. He's doing so. The thing is, though, they cannot get mad at him because if the federal government was doing their job in securing our borders, you wouldn't have states scrambling to try to do it themselves.
That's true. When you brought up the Confederate, it made me think, and we're leading right into economic empowerment as well as reparation. Is the bill that Republican Brian Babin proposed that is a sort of a block on reparations. So I guess the question would be, what are the potential benefits and drawbacks of HR 4321 as proposed? And I know benefits is kind of a tricky thing that I threw in there, but what are the benefits and drawbacks of HR 4321?
It's not tricky at all. The benefits is that hopefully we'll wake up and run for office. I don't want to hear nobody complain about this. I've seen people call themselves being outraged. I've said nothing. Hey, we get what we get. If we don't want to be the people in the government making the policies, then we are at the mercy of those in the government making the policies. If we think the only thing we have to do is drag our tails to the ballot and vote for the awful options that we are presented with, then this is what we get. We can easily run for office, a large mass of us on a reparations platform. A lot of us might lose, but I bet you a lot of us will win. And we could be the people in office writing the policies. We could be the people in office taking a stand against this. We could be the people in office using our now government platform to help go out there and endorse and help elect other people who are on cold. So the benefit is hopefully this will wake us up. And if not, do we get what we get? And that means we're happy with it. The funny thing is, in the 1860s, our ancestors could have easily said, we done built this nation, we done enslaved away. Robert Small's help was enslaved, and then he helped fight for the nation. He could have said, I am tired. I'm just going to go to Beaufort. I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to enjoy some time. Robert Small said, now I'm running for office. I built the nation, fought for the nation, and now I'm going to help make sure my people are protected politically in this nation. A lot of us are lazy, just pure lazy. We'll just stay on Twitter and tweet and say no tangibles, no vote, or I'm not voting, I don't get any policies, as if that's all. Okay, don't vote if they're not giving you any policies. But if they're not giving you any policies, it's because they want you gone or they want you a bottom class. If you don't vote for them, okay, good. But other people are. So you're going to be the bottom class anyway because they're still going to get in office. So it's almost like I always say, it's like going to a restaurant. Going to the ballot to vote and you see a bunch of awful options. It's like going to a restaurant and they give you plates of food and you don't like either option. What you going to do? Just sit there. Okay, you don't eat because you don't like the food. So you're just going to sit there and starve? Or you're going to make your own food. You're going to make your own food and feed your people and give them enough energy where they can run too. And then we have a booming economy around here. Same thing with not voting. We say don't vote because they're not giving us policies. That's good. I support that. But what are we going to do? If we just going to sit there and be a bottom class anyway? Because either way, it's going to happen. Or do we run for office on a platform that we deserve? So the benefit of this is that hopefully it'll wake us up. The drawback of this is nothing. Hopefully it'll wake us. The drawback is that if we sit back and do nothing, then this passes and we will deserve it. And I will not shed a tail. Now, the good news is, though,
I can understand the angle you took that. I can understand the angle in which you went with that. I can understand.
Yeah, I'm not crying. Get off our lazy behind and stop just sitting there talking tough on Twitter, and then you log off, you go to bed and just watch Netflix and do nothing. We have to be activated. Our ancestors had far less in the 1860s in a much more horrifically violent anti-Black time. So if we sit there and let this pass, that's us. And if it passes, we can always run for Congress and try to get it vetoed or overturned. But that's us. That's all.
So one of the major things on your last run is that you're a reparationist. So how would you define reparations and what specific forms could they take to address historical injustices on our people?
The good news is I don't need to define reparations because this country's already defined it. They've done it for several Native American tribes, and technically, if you want to consider the settlements they've done with these tribal nations where they're still giving them a tribal budget and they're able to spend it as they see fit. And one tribe in particular, every member gets like $1 million to spend. One tribe in particular, every member gets so much money that none of them work. That's still reparations they're getting. These are centuries after the wrongs that were done to them. Japanese Americans got direct cash payments. And before anyone comes to me with that BS about, oh, those were the ones that actually went through the wrong. No, it was not. Because if they were dead, it went to their children or a surviving spouse, okay? They did it for people who were exposed to radiation. And indeed, now these people went to something physically. The downwind radiation caused illness for them. But if they died, it went to a child, or I think any direct descendant of theirs. Don't quote me on that. You have the Iranian hostage receive reparation. People were taken as war in Guam. I can go on and on. So the same, I don't believe in me defining it. I believe that we live in a nation that's based on laws, even though this country ignores it when it comes to Black people. And therefore, we have something called precedent. The president of America, the president of reparations in the United States of America is direct cash payment at a minimum, but also followed by special programs. Because Native Americans get all these benefits, but they get a hell of a lot of special programs as well. So for freedmen, it's going to be the same thing, direct cash payments, and they ain't giving us nothing. They're paying what they owe, but also special programs. And the programs will be overseen by our own agency of the government, or our own agency that will be separate from the government, but buffered by it.
Do you have a figure of what the cash payment, the initial cash payment would be?
Yes. The amount I've come up with is pretty much $2.8 million per qualified recipient. And that's based off of study and research by economists and historians who have looked into this matter. One book I read was Dr. Sandy Garrity and Kirsten Miller's book. God, the title just slipped my mind. From Here to Equality. The other book I read was The Black Tax. And also, I read the works of other historians, a lot of these were white, who said that in slavery, for example, the worth of our ancestors who were enslaved alone was $42 to $84 trillion. Right now, today, as you and I are speaking, the ports of the United States of America, I'm right here in Ridgeland, South Carolina, outside Savannah, Georgia, brings in hundreds of billions of dollars each day to this nation. The port of Charleston, hundreds of billions of dollars. Savannah is the third busiest port. Charleston's the ninth busiest port. I'm 30 minutes from the one in Savannah, an hour from the one in Charleston. The railroads that we're still using, okay? 90% of it, all of it actually, in the South, in the Gulf, and some of it in the Midwest were done by our people who were enslaved. They sought our people because they were experts in stone masonry, blacksmithing, okay? The irrigation system, the agriculture, rice. Rice made America the richest place in the world. South Carolina and Charleston was literally the richest city in the world. South Carolina was literally the richest place in the world, all because of the rice that was grown by my ancestors. Irrigation, the first plumbing public water system in America was done by Black people here in South Carolina. I can go on and on. That is the essential infrastructure. In the 1850s, cotton made up almost 60% of America's GDP. And cotton at that time was being grown in a handful of states in the South, all by Black Americans. So ain't no one will, and people want to say, well, that didn't build the nation. BS, because the reason a lot of these enslavers claimed they didn't want to end slavery was because they said the nation needed it. They said the nation would fall without it. Now their great-great-great-grandchildren want to turn around and say slavery didn't build the nation, when their great-great-great-grandmothers and fathers were saying if you take away slavery, the nation would collapse. That was literally the argument that the enslavers made. Even people in the North, we need to kill this myth that people in the North was against slavery. Even people in the North whose factories manufactured a lot of the crops that was growing in enslaving states were fearful of an economic collapse without slavery. But it's not just slavery. We were actually treated even more genocidal and deprived of our rights after slavery. Jim Crow, redlining, debtors prison, land theft, racial massacres, separate but equal. Okay, I can go on. So,
one second, Marcel. So 2.8 million per foundational Black American. And what would be would it be an ongoing monthly stipend as well, or just that initial payment?
Oh no, it will be ongoing. Look, people can criticize me all they want. If somebody has a better plan, let me see it, and maybe we can work that out. I cannot think of a way to pay $2.8 million to some 50-something million people. And now people like to use inflation as an excuse. The government uses inflation as an excuse all the time to not do things that they can do for Americans. Meanwhile, inflation doesn't stop. Congress just gave themselves like a $5,000 to $8,000 raise.
Yep.
And it's what, 500 of them? So I'm not a mathematician, but I know that's money up there. Okay. They give themselves a raise all the time. They just sent Ukraine another tens of billions of dollars. They're sending federal aid to countries that hate us. Okay. They're bailing out corporations. No one's worried about inflation then. They're not worried. They weren't worried about it. And really, the PPP loans was trillions of dollars. They just canceled it. They magically just hit a button and canceled the debt for the PPP loans. However, if we were to do $2.8 million and 50 million to the people, that would cause super inflation. That is true. So my plan calls for those recipients, such as myself, as you, to get paid in bonds. People don't understand bonds. Look, I'm no economist either. I have to study all these things myself. Bonds are pretty much yellow dollars. They're actually worth more than green dollars. That's why wealthy families, corporations, and countries, they pay green dollars to get the yellow dollars. Bonds bear interest. So we will get $2.8 million in cash bonds, and they will pay us interest on those cash bonds at a rate that accounts for inflation, even though there's a certain type of bond that I'm going to use that does not see a drop in its value in spite of inflation. But I don't want to get into the weeds. But we will get paid.
You're talking about tips.
Those,
tips.
Yep, T-bonds, exactly.
Yep.
We will get paid on those bonds monthly until we get our full amount. And don't quote me because I work with economists who do this part for me, but it will be around 3 to 4 years until we get our full amount, and then the payment's done. Special programs will continue.
If we get bonds, I know some people will be asking, well, how do I go out and buy the house I always wanted? How I go out and acquire land? How do I go out and buy that Lambo I always wanted? I mean, what would we do with those bonds in order to get the fiat money in order to buy these things?
So I did the math, and I'm not going to pretend like I have the numbers here, but if we were to do my plan, I think it would come out to like $15,000 a month. Okay.
Yeah.
If you can save $15,000 a month for 6 months, you'll be able to put a good down payment of the house and be able to pay the mortgage of the house.
That's true.
Now, listen, we have always been industrial people. Okay, we are going to still be working. We're going to still be out there. You know, most of us are going to take out $15,000 and make it into $150,000 a month.
Absolutely.
So we're going to still be very economical, industrial people. So I cannot account for how a person is going to spend their money personally. I already wrote the plan. I'm running a campaign to help white Americans, but all Americans. I don't kiss anybody's behind, but it's true. You want more people to buy into the plan, because the more people that buy in, the easier it is your job. So I spend a lot of time explaining to white Americans, I'm in South Carolina, so a lot of them are conservatives, that this is going to help you as well. And I show white Americans how we already are paying reparations. They're paying it to illegal immigrants. They're paying it to Ukrainians. They're paying it to nations in the Middle East that hate us and hate you. They're paying reparations, and it's been shown illegal immigrants take at least 15 to 20% of their money and send it overseas. Some studies have shown 30%, 40%. So we're giving them resources and they're giving us the middle finger and sending it to their countries, making them richer who hate us. I'm explaining to white Americans that it makes more go right back into our nation.
Into America.
That's going to make your school better. There are some bigots who are hateful, and no matter how good their life will be, they're going to be against it just because it's going to help us. With those ones, I give you the middle finger, die off. However, those white conservatives who may just not understand reparations, who may have heard all the information from Fox News and Prager University and Newsmax, I explained to them that it is the best investment America can make with its money. And you know what a lot say? Not all, but a lot of them say, well, hell, I never thought about it that way. If we're going to spend money like we're doing already, it might as well go, even Ann Coulter makes this point, it might as well go to a group that was actually done wrong by America. We don't owe these illegal immigrants anything. We don't owe these oil-producing nations that hate us anything, who are right now, as we speak, going around trying to get nations to turn against us and cause economic collapse. So let America be hateful. You know what? During the days of the Cold War, do you know what the main weapon of the Soviet Union? You know the main weapon? It wasn't nuclear weapon. Huh? Propaganda. And what was their propaganda? Using the internal strife of America. The Soviet Union realized that America has treated Black Americans so awfully that they felt that they really never had to conquer America. They felt that all they had to do was get the tens of millions of Black people in America to feel so disenfranchised, like we always felt, and to feel that they were offering us hope and have us turning against America from the inside, weakening, and then they will conquer. If you read it, that's literally what the Soviet Union was hoping. What? North Korea, Iran, they always bring up China. They will, Cuba, Fidel Castro will always say to America, don't you dare criticize me. Look at how you treat the Blacks. China has said that. North Korea has called out America. Iran, all these countries realize America, a house divided cannot stand. All these countries realize that just like ancient Rome, nations collapse within the house and then within the community. They realize that America is weakening itself with all these internal strife. And America will never be a strong nation. It will never be as prosperous. And white Americans who at one point were seeing their wealth soar, and it is still soaring, but a lot of white Americans aren't feeling it. There are white Americans now who used to just go and get a manufacturing job and get a good six-figure pension and live well. They're not seeing that anymore because they're never going to, you all ain't never going to prosper until Black Americans are given the justice we deserve.
Now, besides cash payments, as far as reparations concerned, I understand the plan you have 2.8, 15,000 ongoing cash payments. But besides cash payments, what other resources or things that are owed that will be given to Foundation Black Americans?
My plan calls for, again, just like Native Americans have their tribal government, my plan calls for us to have our own agency separate from the government, but given a budget by the government. Republicans should support that. They offer small government, right? Well, that's small government. We have an agency of our own that responds directly to our needs. My plan calls for land grants. Okay.
Wait a minute. Now, the organization you're referring to, would that be similar to what the Native Americans have, the Indian Bureau of Affairs?
Oh, no. Well, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, yes, but it will be the return of the Freedmen's Bureau. There will be an agency in D.C., but we will have offices mainly throughout the country, but especially in the South, where the blackest part, especially in the Black Belt, that would attend to our needs. My plan calls for us to get land grants. Most of these land grants will be in the region where most Black Americans live, 61% of us and growing, and that's the South, okay? And most of these land grants will be to get Black Americans back into farming. I don't know why people turn their nose up at farming. Farming was the number one way that Black Americans propelled themselves into the middle class and upper class. That's why they always wanted to take our land. The number one cause of lynching was bigots wanting to steal Black land. I will have business grants. I call it the Black Wall Street Initiative. Okay, every time we built a successful, thriving centers of commerce, this nation would either burn it down, flood it, use eminent domain to take the land, put at the Federal Housing Authority while they were doing suburban developments and projects, not the projects of today, but projects of the past where people were helping people propel into wealth and home ownership. They did that for white Americans. But for Black Americans, they literally had a memo instructing them to target Black American neighborhoods with highways and railroads. So I would have land grants, business grants. I want us to have our own special schools, like Native Americans have their own tribal schools. Native Hawaiians have their own special schools. Why do we not have our own schools? I want us to have the return of Freeman banks, Freeman post offices, Freeman hospitals, our own judicial system. Okay, so those are just some of the special programs offered underneath my plan. And look, people say, "Oh, you want separation?" Okay, you got white communities throughout this country that are all white, gated country clubs, all white. No one complains. You want to complain though when Black Americans. I don't think we can be unified. That don't mean we have to always live with each other. If a person wants to live in the neighborhood, that's fine. But if a person wants to go to a thriving Freedman community, I don't see anything wrong with that.
I mean, you make a good point, because the U.S. government actually paid Native Americans to segregate. That's why they created, the reservation. So simply, they will pay for segregation. They've done it before. They're still doing it to this day. That's why most people in America never really runs across a true Native American. And if they did, they probably wouldn't even know. They probably think they're Hispanic to the most part. I've been on some reservations, and I understand the federal funding that goes inside of these reservations, because I was shocked to see brand new schools. This one, I was stationed up in Washington State, brand new schools, and all of the buses had U.S. federal government tags. And that's when it hit me that these reservations, the schools, the resources, the stipends, the money, everything is coming from the federal government. So they have been getting reparations, because a lot of times, the anti-Black narrative is that, well, you have not been through slavery. You haven't really been anything. You haven't been through Jim Crow. And I said, why don't you protest for the descendants of Native Americans to block them from getting reparations? Hush over Jerusalem. No one has anything to say. So, there's an anti-Black narrative within this country that stop us. I don't know what it is. I mean, we know what it is, but we don't know what it is, right? Because you want to pay everybody, but you don't want to pay us. You literally paid everyone you have aggrieved and done wrong to, except those who built the country. So that's where I kind of draw the line at, and seeing it up close shows you the hatred and the anti-Black sentiments that this country has for us, because everything has already been proven. We don't have to look at, like you stated before, we don't have to look at reports. We don't have those statistics. We have all the history right there in front of your face. But we have people in Congress still stating, oh, well, we have HR 40. And I'm like, well, when you look at these other groups, there were really no studies done in order for them to make treaties and fork out grants and a partition off land. There's been a lot has been done for other groups except for us.
Exactly, and still being done. Look at Afghani refugees rolling out the red carpet.
That's true. That's true.
And white Americans like to say, well, nothing's being done specifically for us. You had centuries of it.
Right.
And European immigrants too. The Homestead Act, GI Bill, Labor Union Act, Social Security Act, the New Deal, which they really excluded Black Americans from. These things were done for centuries, decades. So there has never been a point in this nation's history where they've done things specifically for Black Americans outside of the target and terrorize us. They've done things specifically for us in that regard. When it's time to hurt us, all of a sudden they don't know how to do it.
Last question on reparation. Have you curated, created a proposed bill that when you get into Congress that you are going to put forth to be voted on?
I don't have a bill, but I have a plan, and the plan's on my website at marcelforcongress.com. You go to the link, We Deserve Better, which is where I lay out my policies, and the plan is there. It's a living, breathing document. So I have a plan, but I don't have a bill written.
Okay. And I know why you haven't have a bill, because, you're waiting for that next step so you can create the bill. I get it. Because you're going to have you're also going to have a lot of help creating that bill as well.
But I have a plan, and really, I have not seen any other plan for reparations. I've seen a lot of people with ideas. Right. They have like little summaries of what they want, but I actually have a plan with justifications and why, and then how I arrived at the figures and more.
Last question. What are your thoughts on the Montgomery, Alabama boat brawl?
That's not new. We've always come together and whip biggest behind. I mean, that's not new, especially in the South. You see, they thought they were going to do that. What Neely up in New York with
Jordan Neely situation?
Jordan Neely, right? They thought that we was just going to sit there and record or even jump in and help a black person get her ass like that. Those raccoons think they're not freedmen of Black America. I think one's in the Dominican Republic. I don't know where the other raccoon was from. So they thought that was going to happen in the South. They think the South moves like New York City. No, we in the deep South, especially a place like Alabama, where we have a vivid history still of lynchings, they thought we was going to sit back and let that happen. No, it's nowhere in the South you're going to see a bunch of white people ganging up on a black person. Other black people who are there in numbers are going to just sit there and watch. Not going to happen. We've always come together. So my attitude is, let's come together to protect each other physically. Let's also do that politically, which is why my main thing has been trying to get us to run for office. You don't need to be specially educated. These people in Congress aren't educated. They're dumb as hell. That's why the whole country's a mess and been a mess. So we can get in there and do a much better job. I met many people as a teacher. I meet many people who aren't certified a day in their life. Some may barely have a high school diploma, and yet I've seen them come in a classroom, be able to educate these students, have good classroom management, you name it, without any formal training. That's how it is politically. So you just have to have a heart for the people. Our people were barely literate at recent history, and yet they were running our communities, and we had thriving Black Wall Streets. So miss me with this whole you gotta be specially educated, have experience, run for office. We need to stop making excuses, protect ourselves physically, protect ourselves politically.
Well, brother, thank you so much for joining me here today. And I must encourage everyone to go to your site, marcelforcongress.com / donate. I know that it takes, like we were saying, it doesn't really take money to get you into office, but it helps to get your name out there, to promote, to market those things. And I know you're on a slew of different social medias. Can you make the people aware of your social media sites and platforms?
Most active on Twitter, it's Marcel, the digit 4, Congress, same tag on Instagram. Facebook is Marcel, the word 4, Congress. And on TikTok, which I hate, I'm only on there, like I feel like it's an obligation, it's I think Marcel Dixon for Congress, something like that. I couldn't fit Marcel Dixon in there.
The last question. This is kind of, looking forward, somewhat of a projection. What are your thoughts on your next run for Congress in your area? What are your thoughts? What do you believe where you may fall at? Essentially, I know you're going to have better chances because you're much more well known than you were before. But where do you think you may fall at? How do you think you're going to perform there?
So, if you had asked me that like a month or so, 2 months, 3 months ago, maybe. I wasn't working. I was doing gigs because I realized I really have to give a massive investment of time to this. I would say much higher. I was very visible, going to a lot of events, paying people to canvas and knock on doors. Unfortunately, now I'm still doing gigs, but I've had to go back to work full time, and I'm not going to run myself ragged mentally and physically, even emotionally, like I did the last time. I'm just not. If we want reparations to happen, then we need to put some skin in the game too. It can't all be on me. So it's not always what I did and didn't do. It's going to be what we did and what we didn't do. However, one thing I'm doing this time that I did not do the last time that I completely underestimated was phone banking. That's really outside of knocking on doors. If you can't afford to knock on doors, I found out, and this is, I don't like to always say research, because I'm running a campaign I don't think anyone's ever ran before, at least in modern history. But I could be wrong, but I don't think anyone's been as vocal in modern history as I about reparations. But making a phone call is the second best, most effective way to get your name out there to voters, and then sending postcards and flyers in the mail. So I'm working on phone banking right now. People have signed up to volunteer. I'm trying to get it set up. Like I said, I'm truly grassroots. I'm not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. grassroots, just phony, just full test. I'm not saying Ocasio full test grassroots where you really have a bunch of big money people behind you and you just talk a good game and really you act all progressive and you mention real progressive things like reparations. You start talking about who is black and try to say you're black woman. You look like woman. Sit down somewhere, okay? You don't know who's black. Bring a black man home and your mamacita will let you know real quick that he's black. Just because you might have a black great grandmother down the line, because a lot of these Hispanics play that game. Mi abuela era negra. Don't play that with me. So I don't have the money. I have a small team, and we have to do everything ourselves. So things don't always happen as fast as I would like, but I'm setting up my phone banking. Look, I'm working smarter, not harder. I'm setting up a script. I have to dignify people with their intelligence. I know people can read a script and follow it. When people want to phone me, I'm giving them the script. The most important thing is have someone to manage the data that they record. If I do that and it happens as I plan, I think it will go well. I'm also going to ask people if they can stuff envelopes. So I'm going to just send them flyers. They get a list of people in my campaign, especially people we could not reach by phone, and they mail those flyers to them because I cannot afford to have the company do it. It is insanely, a lot of things are insanely expensive. I made some big mistakes in this campaign. I didn't know, I should have known. The world of politics, well, I didn't know. The world of politics is filled with a bunch of disgusting excuses for human beings, disgusting, who don't do their job. They take your money or they do a terrible job. They come at you with this glowing portfolio and you pay them good money to do what they said they're going to do, and they do a half behind job. You can't sue them because technically they did their job. So you get told by any lawyer you speak with that is just buyers beware. So I said, you know what? No more. I'm doing it me, doing it my way. So where I'm going to land, Blacklogic, I don't know. But what I can say is that reparations, I'm like that baseball player with a strong arm. I may still be in the court, but reparations is going to go much further than me, and it has. Because now I went to a few Black Caucus meetings. Everyone's talking about reparations. Is talking sufficient? No. Because you got to follow up with policies and actions. But the fact that it's becoming more a part of people's daily language in South Carolina, and they're actually asking people running for office who come to the South Carolina Black Caucus, what's their stance on it? It shows, I can't take full credit, but I'm definitely going to take some. And I think it's going to be even more. Reparations are going to take hold even more than that.
And don't forget to promote your YouTube channel. I know you recently started a YouTube channel. Yeah.
Yes, it's called 50 Shades of Greg, Gregg, with Greg Marcel Dixon. I'm really not a podcast person, but I actually enjoy it, strangely enough. Like, I guess that's the teacher me. Everybody says, I guess I just enjoy elucidating on different topics and whatnot. I enjoy, it really does allow me to expand and expound on different topics. And, of course, the media is going to take things twisted, chop and screw like T-Pain, and they're going to try to make me seem like whatever, which I don't care. I'm prepared for that. But it allows me to kind of have things recorded where people can go back and listen to it until YouTube strikes my channel. Now, which that's always in the works. They'll probably have me on their to-do list right now.
Probably so. Well, once again, Marcel, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it, brother. And I encourage everybody to go to marcelforcongress.com/donate and help this brother get into Congress, because without us, people like him, reparationists, helping them from the grassroots and supporting them, they have a better chance at getting to office without support and help. You have any last comments, Marcel?
No, I just want to say to people, stop complaining about these people in power and replace the people in power. Stop sitting there thinking Jesus or some candidate is going to come down from heaven and land on the ballot, and your only responsibility is to vote for them. Stop being cowardly, because I think a lot of us do it out of cowardice and fear. Let's stop talking about our ancestors if we're not going to move the way our ancestors moved. And if they can run for office in the 1860s, some of them were damn illiterate, and they can do it then, there's no excuse for them to do it now. The only salvation we're going to get is going to come from us. That's it.
Absolutely agree. And with that being said, be one.